Hey, Chestnut Street family. Hey, I'm back. Thank you so much for just supporting us. Sorry for the delay and the gap in between videos, but we have one right now, and I really want to just speak on this topic because in the last couple of weeks, I've experienced a significant loss to somebody who was really dear to my heart. I found it hard to really find my thoughts and functional work and things of this nature. And I thought to myself, like, if the skills and the tools I use to get through this, or as I go through this, I should say, because I don't really think I'm through this yet, but as I go through this, I really wanted to share some of those tools with you guys. So hopefully somebody who's watching the video, if you've experienced a loss of a loved one or loss of anybody that's really close to you, you've probably experienced what we call grief. And grief is when it's the emotional reaction to losing something or someone. You can grieve that person. And in my situation, it was the loss of a very, very extremely close family member that kind of found myself going through these particular stages. So the first stage in this process is denial and isolation, but they call it denial. So the first stage is denial, and denial is when you essentially just really think to yourself or try to prove to yourself that this is actually not happening, that it's not actually happening. You begin to deny it, and actually denial is a common defense mechanism, so that will defend you from experiencing those negative emotions. But denial is that first stage when you begin to tell yourself that this is not real, this is not happening, and it's denial. I most certainly went through this. I remember getting a phone call from another family member, and I remember my first words was like, quit playing, this is not real, because I did not want this to actually be the truth. But so the first stage is actually denial. The second stage is anger. Anger. That's the second stage. And in anger, it's your emotional response directed at the fact that your loved one is deceased and your loved one has passed on. And anger to me is one of those things where it protects hurt. When you don't really want to feel those deeper emotions like hurt, anger comes and protects that. So the second stage is this anger. And you can see that where you can get angry with yourself, get angry with other people. You feel like you should have done this, you should have done that. And you can just really have an emotional response that's heavy in anger. In my particular situation, I didn't really stay at that stage very long with anger. I had a little bit of that, but I didn't really have a ton of anger. But you might be different. You might find yourself a lot angrier and at that stage much longer than I was in my particular situation. Now, the third stage in this situation, remember the first stage is going to be denial, and the second stage is anger. Now, the third stage is bargaining. And bargaining is when you begin to see if somehow if you do this, you can change the outcome of the particular situation. You might begin to think to yourself, well, man, if I just would have called this person, if I would have been there, if I would have had them do this, somehow this situation could have been completely different. And that's the bargaining. And an attempt to bargain is some people really try to make these situations with God. Say, you know what, God, if you just let this person pull through or something like that, or somehow not make this, real, Lord, I will serve you 24/7 or something like that. So it's many different things how people begin to bargain. But I believe that bargaining is really latent in guilt. It's really focused a lot in guilt. So when you go through that bargaining process, typically you're experiencing a lot of guilt associated with that. The fourth stage in this particular process of grief, again, we're talking about the process of grief. The fourth stage is depression. It's depression. And you can have one external response of depression where you're crying and you find yourself not wanting to eat anything, not wanting to sleep, not wanting to do a lot of different activities that you really enjoyed, things of that nature. For some people may get seriously depressed and they may have thoughts of self-harm. Or you might find yourself in a different type of depression where it's much more subtle and it's much more internal, where you just go within yourself. And that's really the kind of depression in my situation that I think I'm really going through, or am currently going through. It's the fact that it's much more subtle, it's much more internal. I don't really externalize things and emotions like those type of emotions a ton, but it's more internalized things. So you can have depression where it's externalized, it's more internalized. But regardless of how that process goes, we're still talking about depression in relation to this process of grief. Then we have the last stage, which is acceptance. When you begin to understand within your mind and your heart that this thing is real and it happened, this person is no longer with us. And that's really what acceptance is. When you begin to stop denying it, you begin to stop trying to bargain, and you get over the anger, you get over the depression, and you get to the stages that this is essentially your new normal. And that's really what acceptance is. So once again, in summary, we have the stages of grief. The first stage is denial. The second stage is anger, followed by bargaining, and followed by depression, and last but not least, acceptance. Hey, this is Anthony L. Thank you guys so much for supporting us with Chestnut Street Speakers. Make sure you hit the like button on this video, and make sure you go ahead and you hit subscribe so that way you never miss the videos that come out. Hey, remember, I love you and you matter.
Chestnut Street.